Hi, you're watching Current Issues. My name is Vineet Malhotra. Ever since Delhi's pollution hit the headlines, not just in India but the world over, the issue has now been brought under the cognizance of the Indian establishment, both at the centre and at the state. We have been talking about this issue on our show because this is not just a metropolitan issue but a national concern, not just for us but for our future generations as well. The Governor of Delhi has called on an emergency meeting to tackle this menace. Our information is that the smog has reduced, but still the quality of air is severely poor and very, very dangerous. And on this note, let's introduce our guest who will be talking about this particular menace that has plagued the capital for so long and now probably has reached its apex. Vimlendu Jha, environmentalist, is with me on the show. Vimlendu, thank you so much for talking to us. Palash Mukherjee, Research Associate for the Air Pollution Control, is also with us. Thank you, Mr. Palash, for talking to us. And Dr. Bharat Gopal, Senior Consultant, Department of Respiratory Medicine, is also joining us. Vimlendu, let's begin with you. The Delhi government announced a slew of measures to tackle, this menace. But can it be simply put as too little, too late?
Yes, I think we need to understand that these measures are actually important in the short run because these are emergency measures, but it also is a clear commentary on how Delhi government as well as central government and our entire Sarkari Tantra has actually failed Delhi's air. Because what we see today, the air quality index that we are seeing today is not something suddenly that we woke up with on 27th of October or otherwise. I think these same announcements were also, by the way, made last year. These announcements were not executed on ground. I really hope that these steps are actually executed and much, much more. By the way, these emergency measures are only going to help in solving the problem in a minor peak level. But real sustained long-term solution roadmap is extremely important. And I think both the state government as well as the central government will have to really come up with some kind of a plan, which is completely missing. If you look at what Supreme Court talked about today as well, Supreme Court has clearly said that we have already passed the orders that has to be executed on the ground. And they're actually right, because the same things were actually, all the things that could have perhaps made some kind of a difference were actually announced in December 2015 Supreme Court judgment. But there was nothing on the ground that was executed. There is a lot of politics around, or a blame game around who is responsible for Delhi's air. I think it's a collective failure of central government, state government, municipalities and citizens of Delhi NCR.
Well, absolutely. And, certain steps should have been taken. And Palash, talking about vacuuming the roads was probably suggested at the beginning when this, menace started to rear its ugly head in the capital region, but it only was done once. Don't you feel that all the actions that the Aam Aadmi Party has probably declared, they should have been done at regular intervals, not when the problem has reached, to such severe stages?
I totally agree with you, and this is what we were discussing earlier also. I mean, the problem is not something that is new. It's been around for a very long time, about 10 years now. And all the measures that were to be taken had been announced last year. For example, let's talk about roads and pavements. So in December 2015, there was a Supreme Court order that asked the Delhi government to maintain the roads and to make sure that the pavements were in good condition. The effect this would have had would have been drastic reduction of your road dust. But there has been no action on it. There was talk about greening of the road dividers and the pavements. That hasn't happened. Vacuuming, I think, is problematic because vacuuming itself is not a very ideal solution. The solutions are right in front of you. You need better road conditions, you need better pavements, and like Vibhendu said, these are emergency measures, these are short-term measures, and there is a lot more that needs to be done in the long term to get the problem under control.
Dr. Gopal, a lot of people feel, there is a health hazard, a dire health hazard which is posed, by these chemicals and pollutants that are in the air. What do you think? How soon should we control, this pollution problem before it actually becomes, transforms into an epidemic?
I think I'll just agree with what the co-panelists are saying, and I'll actually go and say that when we talk about pollution, nobody is holy. We all have played a part in creating this mess. It could be us, it could be any of the public which is there, because see, when we have a public, we get a government to rule us or to govern us. And if we have this type of pollution and we are actually going in and finding these things at this level, probably we have all failed in our part at our bit. Now just look at the type of pollution. We saw a pollution and we woke up. So we had a visible air pollution which actually made us look into this problem. You think the levels 30 days back were good enough for us to live? That was an invisible air pollution. So what our co-panelists were saying, that we have to wake up the whole year. We are not going to wake up once we get chikungunya. We are not going to wake up once we get smoke related diseases, and then we'll wake up when we get swine flu. Why can't we do an all-round effort the whole year to look at the environmental issues and which can and do lead to all these diseases? So waking up now, I think it's a very, very short term and short sighted views which we are looking and vacuuming for 3 months, and then this is not going to help. You look at us from a respiratory physician point of view, look at my patients. They are absolutely in agony when we have to see them in the ICUs, and it is something which is man-made. So that hurts a lot as a doctor.
Right. Okay, Vimlendu, coming back to you, this is a very probably an idealist question that I'm about to ask you. When normal citizens are actually forced to move the Supreme Court for their basic right to live, to breathe fresh air, what does it say about our politicians? What does it say about our state?
It says a complete collapse of governance and government and political will. It is a complete commentary on how our governments have actually, how little the governments care about human life and human health, because otherwise they would have acted. And I'm very, very hopeful that the Supreme Court should come very heavily and penalize some of these government officials, ministers and whosoever, in terms of not executing or coming up with excuses in terms of why they did not do what they were supposed to do last year, or perhaps a year before, or perhaps all these 10 years. So, I was telling someone that it's good that Supreme Court has come and has intervened in this matter, and strictly so, but also unfortunate that it's so sad that our courts have to run the country, our courts have to take stringent decisions, and still our government, our political parties, our current dispensation, be it in center or in state, don't really care. So it's a good move, but an unfortunate move. It weakens the pillar of democracy. It weakens the idea of governance in our country, when for every small little thing, and in this situation we're talking about a grave situation, the Supreme Court or the courts of India, be it NGT or High Court or Supreme Court, has to intervene and tell them to behave, tell them to do something as simple as giving a health advisory. Imagine we still don't have a health advisory. The schools got shut today. Only 1,800 schools were shut on Saturday. Construction, we know that 45% of our pollution comes from construction, but there was no direction all through. As in, why did the government wake up only on November 6th? So, there are very core issues, and these can't be pardonable. This is not an ideological problem. This is a problem of lack of political will and corruption of a kind, because corruption is not transactional. Corruption is also when you do not do your duty, when you push your people to breathe toxic air, and little children who are actually, if you go to any emergency ward of a hospital, you see hundreds of children being admitted there because of bad air. And who is responsible for this? Of course, the citizens also, but also the government that actually is supposed to ensure that basic quality of right to life and basic quality of air and water is maintained. And they have failed miserably.
Right. Okay, in 1952, London was also hit with a similar problem. They had a cocktail of sulfur, nitrate and carbon in the air. About 4,000 people died. 8 days after Diwali, Pulash, the government decides to, take a slew of steps. I find that very absurd. They waited actually almost a week, to come up with measures. And even before Diwali, there was no health advisory. They knew there were going to be crackers. They knew, just like last year, there was going to be, an acceleration, a proliferation of pollution. Why did the government not actually take enough steps, or, post warnings or advertorials, or advertise on television to not burst crackers? Why aren't they proactive about this? Is it that hard?
And still there's no ban, Vineet. By the way, there's still no ban on firecrackers.
Right.
There is still no ban.
There is no ban on firecrackers, though it's reduced to the extent of 30%, but that is not enough. Polash.
Let me put it very straight to you. What Divendra said is very correct. I mean, there's a lot of corruption and there's a lot of inaction at the government levels. But where does this stem from? This essentially stems from the fact that this is not something that is popular politics. Environment is not a popular subject in a vast majority of our country. Only now it is coming up in cities like Delhi and Bangalore. But in spite of this, there is so little action happening. As individuals and as the residents of Delhi, we haven't woken up enough to the issue around us. I'm telling you, 1 week from now, when the current smog goes away, we'll all be back to normal and we'll be talking about the US election and we'll be talking about the upcoming winter, and this issue will all be forgotten.
Right.
Why is it that we as individuals don't look at why 300 micrograms per cubic meter is not good enough, and why do we have to wait till it reaches 900 to wake up to this? As individuals, there's a lot we could be doing in our day-to-day choices. There's a lot that we could be doing in terms of demanding action of our representatives. This is something that we don't do. Right. Having said that, the government has been very inactive at all three levels in Delhi, be it the center, be it the state, or be it the municipal corporations. All three have not done what they were supposed to do since last year. We at my organization have been constantly monitoring their activity and pushing them wherever we can. But there is only so much that can be done. I mean, even last year, the action plan was from civil society and from the judiciary. There was no initiative that the government showed themselves. In spite of telling them exactly what to do, for example, public transport, we have had a 3,000. We have had a shortfall of 3,000 buses in Delhi since 2006, and today that number has gone up to 6,000. Where are the buses? The Chief Minister promised to get in 1,000 buses as part of his manifesto. Where are those buses? The same with the central government. I mean, there are initiatives and there are political promises, but none of them get delivered upon.
Absolutely. And Dr. Gopal, coming back to, Vimlendu also raised this point that the citizens too also have to be held responsible, for being one of the main reasons for this pollution. Do you think the current establishment has been proactive in educating the citizens of this city? It's been proactive in telling them, discouraging them not to use firecrackers, not to have multiple vehicles, use public transport. And if so, have you seen anyone come up to you and tell you that, they were probably aware of, whether this was going to happen or not?
No. I think that's the most disappointing part. What is happening is that we all speak, and there was so much of advertisements for odd events and so many other things, and millions of rupees being spent. There was hardly an advertisement to stop crackers. I didn't at least get across to them. And you forget it, last 3 days has been terrible in Delhi. Every news channel is showing. Today morning from 4 o'clock, because of one reason or the other, which I cannot probably go on air, there were crackers all around. I was woken up at 4 o'clock with sounds of crackers in a posh locality of New Delhi. So what can a government do if the citizen itself is not ready to? Ultimately, these are our representatives. They have come from us. So first we have to show the change. We have to be the change. That's probably what Gandhi said, that we have to be the change before we can start pointing fingers. Secondly, do you actually see anybody coming? Hardly any. They are more interested in asking me questions about which air purifier to buy and which mask to use. That means they have given up to this fact that we are now beyond preventions. We have to look for these short-term solutions. They are not looking at what is happening to the children. There were studies years back from Harvard which said if the children are exposed to these type of dust, the aging of lung actually starts exponentially earlier than it is supposed to be. So if I look at a lung function of a young guy who is 24 and my machine shows his lung age is 42, I think it is deplorable. That is the air quality we are making them actually live through. So hardly anybody has come. The initiative from maybe the doctor communities, the NGOs, is too little. Until there is a political will to sustain this, it's going to be very, very difficult to actually get through.
Well, absolutely. And Vimlendu, coming back to you, you did mention, there is probably a dearth of political will. How about a dearth of political consensus as well between the centre and the state? They have implemented a slew of, actions in the past as well, but they haven't been consistent. They haven't been able to enforce them with an iron fist. Is that what's required?
Yes, so if you look at environmental discourse or environmentalism or ecology is not part of political priority of any political party. As in all across you see environment doesn't really matter. And that is something that you end up seeing represented by their inaction, because right now if you look at how this entire air quality issue has played out in public domain, it's all about putting the blame on the other. Delhi primarily says that it's not, Delhi government says that the pollution is primarily because of Punjab and Haryana. Central government is blaming Delhi government. Punjab and Haryana is shirking that responsibility. So I think all across, it's everybody's problem, and this is where the best part could have been. And imagine that all of them are sharing the same air shared. They should come on the table and forget about their politics and their ideology, because everybody is breathing the same air or is not wanting to breathe this air that we are actually talking about. So I think they should leave behind their politics, because this is dirty politics. It's toxic politics that they are actually doing. And please, I want to remind every political party here that you might think that the citizens of Delhi are very, very stupid, that they might not vote on environmental reasons. I'm telling you, in the next 4 or 5 years, the reason why someone will vote for a particular political party will be based on your political consciousness, will be based on how responsible or irresponsible you are on issues of public ecology and public health. And my last point is this, that public ecology is no more something that was on next to a river or in the forest. We are not discussing air that is in the forest or water that is in the river. We are discussing water in my tap and air in my bloodstream. And when people start dying and queuing up for that and suffering, because you and I who live in Delhi, we know how much pain there has been in breathing, just mere breathing last couple of days. We will not forgive our political class. We will take revenge. We will teach them a lesson, and that is what is happening. And I hope that's going to take a long time. I hope Supreme Court of India tomorrow teaches them a lesson. If these politicians don't teach a lesson to themselves on their own, if they can't get the point that they are sitting in Delhi, which is completely toxic, and if they can't see the toxic air, God save them.
Well, absolutely. They have to be held responsible. And, Palash, coming back to you, there is a proper department which has bureaucrats, it has elected officials who have portfolios, who have KRAs, they have responsibilities. Yet the situation is, gone from bad to worse. Well, how incompetent must one be to let the national capital come to this, stage of pollution? How incompetent?
Absolutely correct. I mean, there is a lot that needed to be done that hasn't been done at all. But having said that, let's get to the solutions. What are the solutions now? Let's talk about, say, for instance, fireworks. So fireworks, currently the status is that we have no idea. I know you said that it's been reduced by 30%, but I don't know where that figure comes from, because I have spoken to the Delhi police, which is responsible for giving out the licenses for sale of firecrackers, and the fact of the matter is, this year they have no idea how many licenses they gave out. So the government itself does not know what it is doing. For firecrackers, I would suggest that the solution be that you set a limit. You set a limit in the total amount of firecrackers that can be sold in the city annually. You say you set a 1,000-ton limit, and then you impose limits all across the city, and you go that way. Similarly, Delhi has certain other disadvantages to it. Geographically, Delhi is located in a low pressure zone. It's influenced by weather from all around. When it snows in Kashmir, Delhi gets colder. Another factor is that no matter how incompetent the political class is, implementation is made even more complicated by the fact that there are political boundaries. Rules that apply in Delhi don't apply in Noida.
Right.
Rules that apply in Noida don't apply in Gurgaon. So here is when the center needs to step in and say that we need to take a regional approach to pollution. Pollution is not a pollution does not adhere to political boundaries. We look at pollution for the NCR region, for the entire region. We have one set of rules. This is what needs to be done.
Well, absolutely. And the Wall Street Journal also spoke of, the pollution in the capital. And Dr. Gopal, how does the medical class feel about, the impending doom that lies in front of you? Because it's after in your hands, to save all these people who are going to be developing these problems, children under the ages of 5, people who have asthma, people who have, lung-related diseases. How do you feel scared of the problem? Do you feel that this is probably something that will go out of hand sooner than later?
Isn't it sad that we are actually discussing this in terms of how do I manage a human or man-made problem for my patients? I would be rather thinking about those infections which are there and cancers and stuff. And we are actually creating cancers with all this. There is so much of data actually to show that these pollutants are going to lead to a lot of incidents of lung cancers, a lot of incidents of blood cancers. So we are actually now seeing asthmatics and respiratory issues all year round. When I started practicing 20 years back, it used to be a time that, okay, you had seasonal bronchial asthma and stuff. So I would just move away from being a doctor and just ask my panelists also, why can't we actually stop the trucks just passing through Delhi? Because I believe this is one of the very, very big problems which this pollution which is occurring because of lot of these unedited trucks which enter Delhi throughout the night. We have seen a lot of these patients actually come back early morning with a lot of issues. So not only in this time, but also in times when supposedly the pollution is less and it is 300, which is 5 times the normal. But we have got used to actually living in that type of pollution. Rather, I believe once we have 60, we start feeling very strange that how can we breathe such a good air. So that is the whole thing. These patients, we are seeing them, as I said earlier, we are seeing them come at an early age. Non-smokers are actually behaving as a smoker asthma, which is called a COPD. So they have never smoked, but they will have classical parameters which will suggest as if this guy has smoked for many years. So this is which was coming. If you don't, in Delhi, you are actually smoking something like a pack of cigarettes every day if you are out in the open. There have been studies to show that if you are actually in traffic at a red light and exposed to the pollution, your chances of heart attacks actually go up by 3 times if that's your daily living. So it is very, very difficult unless we actually stop this, because the treatment is going to be very, very tough. And young people, the comorbidities, the amount of young lives and young life days which we are losing is very, very difficult to even think.
Vimlendu, I read a lot about, the pollution menace in Delhi, and a couple of things that stood out for me, were a few words like, the symptoms are similar to the Bhopal gas tragedy. So the second thing that, really startled me was evacuation is an option. I mean, it turns out to be a warlike situation.
Not as bad as, and I think that's a little exaggeration. People are not fainting, people are not dying, because Bhopal gas tragedy was an extreme situation. So I would not want to compare the situation right now as to that disaster. But yes, the situation is grave. There are people who are suffering. As I told you, go to any hospital in Delhi and you'll find hundreds of people actually flocking the emergency ward. Children, they're suffering. You and I are actually get this irritation in our eyes and are not able to breathe properly. So situation is grave. But if the thing is that if we do not really act now, we should have acted actually yesterday. If we don't act now, it will be no less than methyl isocyanide disaster, Bhopal gas tragedy kind of a situation, because we are actually living in a war zone where it is no more a manner of speaking saying gas chamber. It actually is a gas chamber.
Absolutely. Palash, there was a study by IIT Kanpur which suggested that, in the days to come, the overall concentration of PM10 in summers is 500 /M3, and in winters it's up to 600. This was actually a warning that was given by, students at IIT Kanpur who came up with the study, who came up with the research, but this was grossly ignored.
I'm sorry, I missed the last part. What
Well,
was your
you know,
question?
some of the students, some responsible students from IIT Kanpur came up with a study, came up with a prediction that, you know, the pollution levels in Delhi in summer and winter are going to be out of control. So there's something should have been done about it probably a couple of years ago. You know, but the center as well as the state, they both failed despite several articulate and educated warnings.
Definitely. Let me put it across this way. Whatever action has happened over the past 4 to 5 years has been led by civil society and by the judiciary. You had the advancement of Euro 4, Euro 6 BS6 standards last year. We were talking about trucks entering Delhi. There was a green tax imposed on the entry of trucks into Delhi, which was again on the orders of the Supreme Court. These are all issues that should have emanated out of the government. The state government, the central government, they are the ones who are in charge of Delhi.
Right,
This is
okay.
it is their job to look out for the sources of pollution and target
Absolutely.
them all individually.
It's their job to look
Hello?
out for the
Can you hear me?
sources and take care of the problem, but the center and the state have grossly failed. You know, and the inadequacies are probably very, very vivid and, you know, right in front of us. On this note, I'd like to thank all our guests for joining us. That is all we have on current issues. We'll see you tomorrow, same time. Keep watching News World India. Thank you.